There comes a time in any run, even a really good run, when you know it's time to quit. I'm Mike Quackenbush, and this is Till We Make It. And right here on my channel, I make videos for fellow professional wrestlers at every single stage of their career. And I do this because when I was just starting out, when I was a rookie in pro wrestling, I had no coach to teach me, nor did I have a mentor to guide me. And I do think lack of access to veteran wisdom, knowledge, and experience played a significant role in my failure to achieve my ultimate career goals. And I don't want that same fate to befall anybody else. If you're on board with that, join the Till We Make It tribe. Subscribe down below. Or if you're in a position to help the channel grow, support Till We Make It over on Patreon. You're going to find a link down in the descriptus. And over on Patreon, you're going to get instant access to our private Discord, as well as to more than 200 posts that I've made containing everything from book excerpts and essays that I've written, to podcasts that I have recorded, to live class recordings, and a weekly Patreon exclusive video you'll never see here on the YouTube channel. Today, I want to talk about a circumstance which has come up several times for me over the years, and sooner or later, if you're involved in professional wrestling for any length of time, it's going to come up for you too. So, let's have an honest talk about quitting. There are 3 occasions I recall vividly when I knew it was time for me to quit working for a wrestling organization. And I want to share those stories with you today. I'm not going to name these wrestling companies because that's irrelevant to the discussion, but I do want to offer you a real insight into what led me to those turning points in my career. All right, let me set the scene a little bit for you. Several years back, I used to work for a company that we'll just refer to as ABC. It was a regular monthly gig that I had where they always paid my full rate, and there was never any issue with the consistency or the money. But their locker room environment was steeped in drug culture, and that is not my scene at all. Often, performers from that locker room would go to the ring and perform under the influence, and too many times that resulted in serious injury to someone involved in the match. And even if it didn't result in injury, the end result was almost always a fairly pathetic showing in the ring. Backstage fights would break out there, and no one seemed to think this conduct was unprofessional. And once, the owner of the company kicked a door in such a way as to crush the head of someone who he didn't like, and then threatened to do the same to anyone in the locker room that was ever disloyal to his company. Now, to be fair, anyone can lose their temper. Most of all, me. I say and do really stupid things when I'm under stress, and it makes me come off like an immature jerk. And I'm only ever assured of 2 things thereafter. Number 1 is I need to apologize because I've just behaved like an immature jerk. And number 2, I need to deal with the embarrassment of making myself look like an immature jerk in front of everybody. And I really do believe, no matter how flawed any human being might be, that they deserve the chance to apologize for these things, and they deserve the chance to try and make things right with whomever might be wronged in those situations. But at ABC, no one was ever embarrassed to behave this way, and no one ever apologized. If a backstage fight broke out and a table got turned over, launching your bag and your gear or crushing your merchandise, the attitude was, "You were in the wrong place at the wrong time, you loser." So even though this was a place where I was paid very well and I was pushed pretty hard, I decided to give my notice and I asked to be written out. Being part of that ensemble kind of made me hate wrestling, and I dreaded going to work there every single month. So I wrapped up my obligations with them, and then I never looked back. And even when they came after me with more and more attractive or more high dollar figure offers, it didn't really matter what bait they decided to put on that hook. I just wouldn't go back. A second occasion also immediately springs to mind, And for the sake of this example, I'm going to refer to this company as DEF because proceeding directly on through the alphabet pleases my OCD brain. Several years back, I was working semi-regularly for a wrestling promotion as they went through a phase where the ownership and control of the company changed hands. And while the types of events that they put on didn't change noticeably, while their fan base didn't go through any appreciable change whatsoever, behind the scenes, there was a real difference. And all of a sudden, there was an influx of both money and enthusiasm, but not a whole lot of organization. Now, if you've been around professional wrestling for a little while, you probably know this is a pursuit in which people frequently grow jaded and resentful of others. And in that kind of scenario, a whole lot of genuine enthusiasm, it goes a long way. And for a while, that influx of enthusiasm did a lot to mask what was going wrong behind the scenes at DEF. But there came a day when I happened to be working there, some of my own protégés happened to be working there, and so too were three men that I hold in the very highest esteem, including one who is an absolute legend of wrestling. And I mean legend in the true sense, not legend in the overused way we always hear it in professional wrestling. I observed utterly aghast at how poorly these three men were being treated by the behind-the-scenes team at DEF. And then, when I got personally involved to try and right what was going unacceptably wrong in terms of the disrespect being shown to these three fellows, I was told that it was too late to fix things, I was hung up on, and the people in charge turned their phones off so there could be no further conversation about it. That night, I had to reckon with this thought. If the people behind the scenes at DEF are willing to treat an absolute legend of the mat wars with such utter disrespect, how long is it before they're willing to treat me that way? Or worse, my students? And although I still had some professional obligations to wrap up with them, I went about satisfying those obligations, and then I never went back to work for them. And I never have. Hey, if you're getting something out of today's video, would you please leave a like-a-palooza? I'm trying to be a more responsible YouTuber about asking for the engagement. Okay, last on my list of sad tales is one from a company you know we're going to refer to as GHI. I worked off and on for GHI across many years, mostly their bigger shows, but every once and again, if my travels happen to take me out to their neck of the woods and dates lined up just perfectly, well, then I jump on one of those cards too. I was never a regular member of their roster, but I felt like a frequent guest star there. Throughout the years, GHI always played in front of modest crowds in unassuming venues, using their poorly maintained ring that became more and more dilapidated as the years went on. And through all my time there, I was always paid the exact same rate for every single match that I had. There was never any hassle about it, and I didn't really mind. I liked the locker room, I liked the company, I liked the people running it. But there came a day when the guy in charge pulled me aside at the end of the show and said, "Hey Mike, the house was a little light tonight. You could see there weren't very many people out in the crowd. I can't pay you your usual rate. Instead, I think I can only pay you about half." And while we could have had that conversation before I went to the ring, well, maybe he was thinking more people would trickle in as the card went on and eventually he'd have enough money in the box and everything would work out just fine, but that's not what happened. You may know that I've promoted and produced hundreds of live pro wrestling events all across the United States and some even outside of the United States. And I've had some light nights myself. I know exactly what that's like. It's nobody's favorite night at the office when the empty chairs outnumber the occupied ones. But I also never depend on my live gate to make my budget. I always have enough liquid cash on hand to make sure everything that's on my budget sheet is covered. That way, I never find myself in the kind of predicament that the promoter of GHI found himself in. But you know what? We all have a bad house from time to time, and this was a guy I liked in a company that I liked wrestling for, so sure, tonight, pay me half my rate. Better that each of us take just a little bit, and that way there's still another show next month and the month after that. If tonight we all decide that we absolutely have to demand our full rate. Maybe GHI goes out of business, and then there's no future work at any rate, half rate, full rate, or otherwise. So, okay, go ahead. Pay me half. But then, later that same calendar year, we ended up having the exact same conversation all over again. The promoter of GHI pulled me aside, pointed out the fact that he didn't have very good attendance, and once again told me he was unable to pay my guaranteed rate. And at that point, I had to say to him, if you're unable to pay me the rate that we agreed upon in advance, I'm not going to be able to return to work for you in the future. And this is going to mark the end of our professional relationship. And it is not as if his story rang false. I could see how few people there were out there front of house. Nevertheless, that did not change my position on this. In each of these three scenarios, I was put in a position where I felt like the only real choice I have here is to quit working for this particular wrestling company. Now, were all the people involved in the running of ABC or DEF or GHI evil, toxic people out to ruin wrestling or get me? No, they weren't. Did they put on terrible shows filled with rotten matches in front of obnoxious fans all of the time? No, they didn't. I'm sharing these stories with you today because I want you to have the benefit of my experience. But even if you were to find yourself in a scenario identical to one of the three I just outlined for you, I hope you realize that you have the freedom to choose what feels right to you in that moment. If you end up having a really long wrestling career, there's no doubt in my mind you're going to spend some time working for organizations that evince a high degree of professionalism in every single thing that they do. And the unfortunate truth is you will probably also work for at least a couple companies that evince a low degree of professionalism in what they do. And no matter what, it's you that decides what it is that you will expect of the companies where you choose to wrestle. No doubt, you're going to find yourself surrounded by certain company cultures or dropped into locker rooms where the sensibilities there feel like a great fit with you. And yet other times, it's going to feel like those things are an affront to your sensibilities. And you're the one that gets to pick. Do I stay or do I go? And unless you're one of the lucky few that is always playing at the corporate level, sooner or later you will be exposed to the volatility of the independent circuit. And when the effects of that volatility turn up at your front door, you're the one that gets to decide what it is that you will abide and what it is that you simply won't tolerate. And sometimes I've been able to make those decisions and I got it right, and other times I don't mind telling you I sure got it wrong. But even in those cases, remember, that's how you learn and that's how you grow. Well, now that you've heard about my misadventures at ABC and DEF and GHI, and you know how I handled it, I'm curious to know. What would you have done differently? Would you have made the same choices that I did in those scenarios? Let me know down below in the comments. And appearing over here are two other videos that I happen to think that you will like. These were not chosen by the YouTube algorithm. Oh no, I chose them for you personally, but I don't know what they're going to be at the time of recording.